Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmet Lewis, and my co-host Mikael Christiansen. How are things, Mikael?
They are approximately decent. Yes.
Approximately average.
We have...
Top of the bell curve.
Yeah, we have... how to say it? Yeah, top of the bell curve. It sounds really exciting until you remember what a bell curve is. But how to say? Well, yeah, we were filming a bunch of new stuff with Handstand Factory these last few weeks. And I am absolutely decimated from that. Now, I had one day off yesterday since then, and my body's basically an old and crumbled, dusty temple. But I shall return.
I shall prevail. Yeah, I think, been filming some new courses and all that, a lot of exciting stuff coming out eventually. Yeah, it takes a lot out of you. I don't think people understand these kind of longer days on set.
Yeah, long days on set, and holy fucking shit. Like, the studio is amazing, but then there's a police car outside, and then there's a fucking pigeon on the roof that needs to scratch around, and those fucking seagulls that keep like sliding down the roof, and then the wind, and then the this, and then the that, and you need to reshoot and retake, and fury.
You can tell Mikael got broken by this.
Oh god, yeah.
The seagull sliding on the roof, there was the roof of the studio it had corrugated metal roof, I think, but then it had some window panes in the kind of corrugated plastic. Something about seagulls, they can't stand on them, so whenever they'd walk across it, they'd instantly start sliding to the bottom and try to fight to fly, and hilarity ensued.
Yeah, they were frustrating as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess we're up for another Q&A, are we not?
Another Q&A where we answer your questions. If you would like us to answer your questions, you can DM them to us on Handstand Factory on Instagram, or you can do them over our website in our contact form at handstandfactory.com. Other than that, let's hit it. So, for a beginner, when is it realistic to expect to do a handstand cold, i.e. no warm-up? I've been practicing for a few years, and it takes me a couple of tries before I can do a handstand, say 3. But even more tries before I can find a decent hold, say 5 more tries. That is when I feel like my body is warmed up and I can start to grip the floor or have access to different muscles to rebalance or adjust.
That is an interesting question because, like, if I'm really cold and just feel fucked, I can't get, like, I can take me 5 times to get up into handstand, no joke. Like, it's funny, like, of course, like, if I really try, yes, I can hold it. It's not that big of a deal. But if I'm not focused, if I don't really try, and if my wrists feeling really cold and stiff, it's just like I want to make really sure that I'm not making any jerky, quick movements. And yeah, it might take me a few tries. But it's something I've found interesting with handstands always, and that is that since you are working in an overhead plane, and during the entry, there's loads of different coordination that needs to happen inside of the entire scapula and the glenohumeral joint and so on to make sure that you get neatly on top of your hands and the shoulders placed. And from my experience, at least before, like you kind of have a little bit of readiness in the body, and like doesn't mean you need to be like warmed up in a way of taking a run first, but just you need to feel that your shoulders are able to do it, and that might take a few tries. Whereas like something like a straddle planche, for example, when I'm strong at straddle planche, I can, like, my best one will be on the first or second attempt, and it will be while being fully cold. Like, it doesn't matter. Same with front lever. I don't need any type of readiness, anything. Like, the best attempt will be on the first couple of ones. Whereas with a handstand that I'm a lot better at than front lever, I'll need to get kind of on into my body. Same with, like, I have the same thing with back lever. I'm a lot better at back lever than front, but I'll need to get some sort of readiness or whatever it is in the shoulders and pecs before I can do it. And like, allow yourself that. Like, allow yourself to take a bit of time to just get onto your hands. So once you'll be very consistent with 30 seconds, it means that like you basically will never kind of miss a handstand again, given the circumstances that you're ready to, or that you allow yourself the time to be ready for it. So like, like don't expect it to become fully for free. At
Yeah.
least, like, I mean, it was more for free for me when I was 19 than now, for sure. Like, I didn't need to warm up then at all then. Whereas now, yes, I need maybe to do a little bit more. Whereas, like, my top point now is, of course, higher than it ever was. So
Yeah.
it's just about, like, you might need to just get onto your arms a bit and, like, allow the muscles to coordinate, and then they are ready to do it, and then they can do it fine.
Yeah, I personally have this weird thing with handstands where I was testing when I was training last phase, and I would test my handstand before warming up. I'd just get my wrists in the state ready to go, test the handstand, no shoulders, nothing else, see what I could get, see if I could even get on the hands, do the kind of bit of warm up I do, which is kind of just structured 10 minutes, just not even anything fancy. And then every time I was like one kick up, one straddle up, whatever I was doing, boom, straight in, 60 seconds, 55, 60 seconds, easy. It was just like, and it was interesting, the dramatic difference, because I was like, some days, like, okay, I'd be fine, and I'd go, okay, up. Other days, like, I couldn't stick, like, I'd only give myself one kick up to allow to do it. So it'd be like, okay, kick up test, can I get even in the handstand, or just fall out, or wouldn't be able to open the shoulders or anything. Do the warm up, and then I'd try the next one, first entry for comparison. So it was like 2 kick ups, so it was like 1 at the start, do the warm up, 1 after. The 1 after, I don't think I missed 50 seconds. Like, so it's very, you know, and then my goal was like to have 55. I was aiming for 55 seconds was my target, to come down, then start the actual training. It's just interesting, the difference between, like, you know, doing a bit of plank, doing some serratus push-ups, moving the shoulders around, doing some active wrist stuff, and then suddenly it's like, oh, you couldn't kick up. Okay, and you've done 5 minutes of that, and boom, okay, ready. Yeah. So it's interesting. Also, one of the things you honed in on is, like, the body needs time to warm up the balance and just get zoned into what you're about to do.
Yeah.
So if you're kicking up and you haven't got awareness of your limbs and everything, and you kick up and you go, oh, my foot's a bit weird, that will throw you off balance because you're too busy focusing on the foot. You haven't gained peripheral awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, you even see this among, like, people doing high-level activity on completely other fields. Like, it's watching some video game players, like, yeah, they'll do warm-up rounds too. I mean, the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
you need to get I think it's more about getting your mind into the headspace and kind of getting that sort of readiness. And I think I want to call a bit bullshit on this idea that, like, being good at something equates being able to do it at any given time.
Yeah.
And, like, that will have to do with what is the relationship between your top point and whatever thing you want to be able to do at any given time. So, like, if your top point is doing a 1 minute 1-arm handstand, yes, you will always be able to do a handstand. Like I said, I also fuck up, but if I want to, yes, I will stay on my first handstand. You put a gun to my head in the middle of the night, I will do a 1-arm handstand. It won't be a problem. But
You're free to test that out, anyone listening.
Motherfucker!
Stand on your hands.
I'll wake up in the middle of the night hearing, like, a click and a gun against my forehead, and it's like, all right, motherfucker, time to prove what you said in the podcast. My wrist will hurt though, but I mean,
I'll do it.
Of course, like, it's possible to pull off, but it's about, like, what level of comfort you're able to do it with, and, like, is it necessary? Like, is it so that, like, you need to be able to do your fullest at any given time, or is it just some kind of jerk off fucking sales tactic? Oh, hey, check me out, I can do everything at any given time. That means I'm so much cooler than you because you actually need to spend 10 minutes warming it up, you pathetic pleb. Yeah, train with me. That is kind of the way that is always being sold, and frustrates me because it's like, look at reality. You're not going to go into any activity and watch people do their highest level skills without getting ready for it in anything from strongman to acrobatics or chess play. Like, people need to be...
Yeah, they warm up for chess.
Yeah.
That's something I learned from the Art of Learning book.
Yeah, and you need to be into the readiness of what you do, and, like, allowing yourself, that isn't a sign of weakness. I think that is a bit, like, a thing that annoys me. And there's another funny factor of this I've noticed. A lot of people that come across with that idea that you don't need to be warm. They live in really warm climates. I double dare you, try that shit in Norway in winter. Like it's not great, because if you walked like outside for 25 minutes to get to your training hall, regardless of your winter gear, it's not going to be amazing to just get onto your hands immediately. It just isn't.
Yeah. You should be able to take photos for the gram at any time. I think a lot of this comes down to like posing for the gram.
Word.
Yeah. It's like, you can just take a few shots. You've got it like infinite. It's not like the old days of camera time when you have a film camera with limited shots. Your phone has basically infinite capacity. So you can do a few bad handstands and get the shots you need still. Yeah.
Word.
Cool. Next question. Is it easier to learn a one-arm handstand on canes?
Yes.
Done.
It's a lot. I mean, learning it, yes, it's a lot easier. Basically, if you have a really comfy cane that gives a lot, like it could be as much as 15 to 20% easier than I would say than the floor. And that is just a straddle. When we talk about starting to moving your legs around, like moving like straddle one arm to full, to figa, to flag, like these things start becoming like 25% easier on the cane than on the floor, which means that like if you're on a high level and you can do those things on the floor, those 25% will be so significant that it'll feel like a breeze to do it on the cane, because like Emmet uses this what do you say, noise cancelling?
Noise cancelling, yeah.
That is a really good way of describing what the cane does. It gives like the softness of the movement of the steel, makes it so you don't need to correct as much in the shoulder and hand.
I realised one of the things we talked about with Helgi on the physics cast is the cane says one of the ways to balance the inverted pendulum is the horizontal movement. If we think about what the cane does when it vibrates, it actually gives that horizontal degree of freedom that we don't actually have on the floor. So that's where the noise cancelling aspect comes. So just a bit of something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, and it's the sensation of doing things on the cane. As I mean, it feels as you become one with the cane in a real way, because like when you're grabbing onto the ground, you have some control of with the fingers and the hand, of course, and you need to block a lot in the shoulder. Like you need to be very strict on keeping the shoulder tightly in place. When you're balancing on a block, you have the thumb on the inside, and like you have the, like I almost call it like you have the ability to pull on the block, which allows you to correct sideways. Like the lateral plane is easier to correct on a block since you have fingers on the sides of the block. So for one arm, it's a bit easier there. Whereas on the cane, you have that, so you can kind of lock yourself to the cane, and then like as the cane sways underneath you, it helps you a little. Like basically, what it does in relation to what Helgi spoke about in the physics podcast, check that out if you haven't. Is that like for the inverted pendulum, where what you do in a regular handstand is you apply torque at the bottom of the inverted pendulum, meaning in a handstand context that you put pressure on the floor with your fingers. Whereas like if you take another way of balancing an inverted pendulum, which is like as if, let's say you take a long stick and you put it in your hand and you keep it balanced by moving your hand underneath, that is another way of balancing an inverted pendulum. Whereas this, like a cane, becomes a little bit of both. Like the cane moves underneath you slightly, which allows you to balance a little bit less, and then you do some of it yourself as well. So it does make it significantly easier, particularly with like learning shapes such as figa, for example, a lot easier on canes than on the ground. Same with the legs together, but it's a useful tool. It doesn't mean that like, oh, anyone that works on canes, they're not real hand balancers. Bullshit. Like it's just it's a great tool, and it's a very good performance tool. And for any of you scoffing of people performing on canes because it's so much harder on the floor, yeah, go and try to perform on floor 7 days a week. It's I've done so. It's not easy. So you basically need to take your technique down by quite a notch. So canes are great. Also, something people don't consider about canes when it comes to performance is if you are in a audience that isn't very slanted, people at the back won't see you. So having canes is actually quite significant in terms of that, because you don't come so high. Like what does it matter if you do your fancy one arm on the stage and you do a flag, but people in the back, they don't see you. So
yeah, there's one of those trends, like, do you remember from the 70s and 80s, or maybe you don't remember, you've probably seen the videos where like handstand performers kind of had a battle of who had the highest apparatus.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
And it wasn't just like I have the longest canes or stuff. It was like I have a platform that's 3 meters tall, but then I have my canes on top of it, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you also
Like-
have like the motors that pushes the cane up.
Yeah,
Those are great.
This kind of
There are
stuff.
some like really messed up old photos I found here a while ago where there was some like enormously tall poles. Like they must have been, I don't know, 30 meters sort of
Yeah.
poles. Like they were swaying. They were extremely tall in some sort of football stadium. Maybe it was Ringling Brothers or some kind of that sort of circus.
yeah,
And people like doing some handstands, probably like elbow supported ones
Yeah.
up there, but it was pretty nuts to watch.
yeah. I remember. Yeah, a lot of those like death-defying handstand acts don't exist anymore.
No, that was a different age.
Yeah,
There are some people doing some crazy stuff
Yeah.
like that, but it's not so common anymore.
no one doing handstands on the wheel of death. Our next question leads into this. Where can you get good handstand canes? There you go.
Handstand canes.
So, yeah, it depends on how much money you want to spend, really.
Yeah, and like what kind of, if you have what kind of resources you have available to you. I think that the absolute best you can do is if you know someone who has canes, or you have a particular set that you would want, that is probably the best. That you tried some, I want these canes because they feel great. You take the measurements, you take it to someone who has like proper machinery that can basically copy it for you. Otherwise, I mean, there are a couple of places online that
Yeah.
sells pretty decent stuff.
So, yeah, so we've got acrobatic-shop.de. They do some nice canes. They actually sponsored us some canes, just to be in clearness, but we're not going to recommend shit. Their canes are pretty good. The sockets and the cane and the steel is awesome. The platform, for someone my size, I'd probably change the sockets into a different platform. If you're like 60, 70 kilos, you're probably fine though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd be wary doing a flag on them. I think I'd probably break them.
Yeah.
But I'm like nearly 100 kilos, so
I think like those canes are really, like, the steel work on them is super nice. So I would clearly recommend like the long, like one of the, I don't remember how long they are. Maybe they're 60 or so,
Yeah, I
the
think
canes.
yeah, 60
that
of
I
the
like.
set.
Yeah.
Then there's the 50. They have different, like, what's nice about them, the modular as well, they sell different size poles.
Mm.
So you can get different size ones on them.
Yeah, I would though say that like any cane that is below 40 centimeters, like you're just working on a block. So like if you actually want canes in relation to the movement that the cane gives you, then you should have something that is 50 plus centimeters.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can just basically just rig up like a set of blocks or something that you make out of wood and glue it together or screw it together, and you'd basically have the same, or just put two blocks on top of a box or something, so that it'll give you the same
Yeah.
kind of challenge. But for like the acrobatic shop ones, they're pretty good. The steel is great. As Emmet said, I would also basically place the sockets in a different plate, since I'm doing like the switches and stuff like that. Then you need a larger platform than the ones that they have, but they're
Yeah.
very good. Like the metalwork is great. Then there's also some from Juggle Gear that are pretty good. Steel work on those is quite good.
Yeah, the only thing about those steelworkers is a bit inconsistent on their ones, and the canes tend to rotate in the sockets on some of the sets. Like the set we got Aliza, our producer, a set of them to say thank you for dealing with us from Juggle Gear. And the platform from Juggle Gear is awesome. It's really well made. It's really solid. The sockets, it tends to wobble around. Now, I fixed it very quickly just by washed any of the oil off that might have been left from manufacturing, but then it still kind of wiggled. So what I've done is just plunged the end of the socket in and out of some dirt, and then just the bit of cover. Then I put it in, and it gives enough friction. You could probably do the same with a bit of rosin, if you guys know what that is. And that worked fine. Now, I think you've seen some sets where they don't rotate at all.
Yeah, I've seen a few that were pretty good. I think the ones that I saw were 16 millimeter steel, and they were pretty good. So just to give you a very short breakdown on some measurements, so for anything that is like shorter than, or for anything 60 centimeters or shorter, you can use 16 millimeter steel and you'll be totally fine. For anything taller than that, like I've seen, like there are 70 centimeter canes that I've seen that are 16 millimeter that are fine for smaller people. One of the girls in the handstand project that I'm working with now, the Right Way Down, she has canes like that, and she's perfect on them. But when I go on that stuff, it's questionable, and just because I'm 20 kilos heavier than her, so that is something to consider. I would say that, like, on average from 70 centimeters or 70 centimeters, you could go with 18 millimeter or 2 centimeter steel. 2 centimeter will be quite thick, quite sturdy, so it also depends on your preference. And like for the milling of the taper, meaning the conical shape in the bottom of the cane, on 16 millimeter canes, you could use a taper that is 4 centimeters long and about 1 centimeter at the bottom. That, if you calculate that should give you the dimensions, or useful dimensions. And that's basically what I use. I use that on 60 centimeter canes because it's enough. So yeah, anything longer, use thicker steel, use sturdier plates and so on, just to not get yourself wrecked, because you don't want neither the cane to bend nor the plate breaking apart or anything like that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those ones I recommend. If you're looking for, these canes we recommend they're reasonably priced. They're not possibly the most aesthetic ones. If you're looking for something a bit more aesthetic and other stuff, I'd recommend that, like, you get them made up. Either get the sockets and the canes made up by someone who really knows circus stuff, or can get the right specs. The other thing is just, like, if you're going for a fancier set or you're going to buy them off someone, make sure they were made by a circus company or someone who actually makes circus gear. So I've seen a lot of sets over the years, particularly when they're made out of metal, and the sockets and the canes were actually fine, but the crossbars on the metal and all that kind of stuff just was jank. The welding wasn't good enough for what it was put through.
Yeah.
So there's if we think about the leverage on the cane, there's a lot of leverage. Like, there's your whole body weight via the length of the cane to the socket, and that was bending the crossbars. So, just watch out. I think there's more force in there than you might think.
Yeah, like, basically make sure that the quality of the stuff that you get is good. I mean, you can make, like, kind of bootleg canes by, I think, like, if you should make a very cheap pair of canes, like there was one pair we had in school that was basically just some welded together shit, and it was a pretty nice pair. It was basically just like an age-formed base made out of a couple of pipes, like metal pipes that were welded together, reasonably sturdy. Then it was 16 millimeter steel that was welded to the pipes in the middle, so that they would be the canes. I think they were like 60 centimeters tall, and then small metal plates welded on top of those canes and blocks screwed in. It works as long as it's sturdy and stable and the welding is well done. Like, make sure the welding is well done. I had one pair of canes where I am so happy I didn't go on those canes back then, because I probably would have ended my career. Like, a friend of mine, he's like an older circus artist in Stockholm, and he came and joined us when we were training. He's like, yeah, hell, can I borrow your canes? And I'm like, yeah, sure, take them. And there was a couple of longer canes that I had, and I hadn't used them for a very long time. So he goes up on them. He does a 2-arm handstand, and like, I'm looking away, and suddenly I just hear a slam and him falling to the ground. And like, the welding on top of the cane just broke off. And he wasn't 2 arms, so luckily enough, he could fall down and just crash. If I had done a 1 arm, or anyone have done a 1 arm at that point, like, they would have fallen down and speared themselves on top of that cane. So like, and that was basically done so that, like, the little steel plate that was on top of the cane had just been welded at the top, I think. They had basically they had the cane. They had made a little hole in the little plate that they had slid on top of the cane, and then welded it shut on top. Whereas like the strong welded canes that I have, that have been now used for like 10 years by me, and like 4 or 5 more by others. Those have welding underneath as well, and like you can see that they've put some steel there so that it should be reinforced, and like a thick, strong welding. So make sure that you have people who know how to do these things, and just don't build some like garbage stuff yourself and put them on the grass and hey ho, and suddenly something breaks and you can hurt yourself on this. So just make sure that you get someone who knows how to do it.
Yeah, it's always this kind of idea. It's like, I think with all circus equipment, like the people who've been making it know circus stuff and have experience. They know how it breaks when circus people use it.
Yeah,
this goes for aerial equipment as well. There's a lot of jank aerial equipment out there made by non-circus manufacturers and don't understand the load that actually goes into your body when you're in space and falling and expecting to catch and all this stuff. So
with all this stuff, like the more paranoid someone are about like the quality of the stuff, the more you should trust them almost, because like there have been accidents within various things, and like if things break when you're doing things on them, like now handstands are very, very soft compared to a lot of other things within circus. But if things go wrong, like you can end your career right there and then. So just don't take the risk. It's very simple to not do so.
Don't buy shit canes.
But don't buy shit canes.
Yeah. Cool. Last question. What exercises / stretches do you recommend for hand balancing prehab / rehab? All of them.
Bicep curls.
10,000
reps.
It's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things. It's like there's no magical cure to bulletproof yourself. If there is, everyone will be doing it. Everyone is different, and everyone needs different needs. So you kind of have to understand, like, what am I training? What are my specific needs in relation to this? And is my training covering it? If it's not covering it, then I need to add something in. It's kind of one of those things. Is it like it's kind of one of those things. It's a very hard question to answer. There is some stuff we do recommend at certain points in your training, but then we wouldn't recommend it later. The main thing to learn, the magic prehab rehab thing, is to learn to manage your training volume in a way that suits you and that you can actually recover from, and learn to pay attention to your body and the signs it gives you that you're about to do a bit too much before it happens.
Yeah, I think like the number one thing before any prehab or rehab is just load management. Make sure that what you're doing week to week is not more than you can handle to recover from. And of course, there's, like Emmet said, you might have different needs from someone else. And I think one thing that is just in general good to keep in a practice that is so specialized as handstands is a more generalized conditioning regime, whether that is basically do a bunch of pull-ups and do a bunch of push-ups or some dips or whatever it is, that other things that you like, but like add in some movements that aren't the same as handstands, because handstands are extremely samey. And I can tell you that from all the years that I've been doing it. Like when I look back at the various periods of practice that I've had, the more linear and the more only handstands I've done, like I think actually like I have had worse results in those periods too. Whereas like the better periods I've had, like then I've been more varied in the training. And I do know very high level hand balancers that basically just train a lot of relative strength things, and they keep improving at their handstands at that through just working at things that aren't directly just stand on the hand kind of.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things, like we have to have in mind the whole idea of SPP and GPP. So we have specialized physical preparation, which is our handstand training. We are specializing in hand balance, but we do have to have a base of general physical preparation. And like with, say, even my more advanced balancers who just focus on hand balance, they still have one day in the gym a week where it'll rotate every single phase of what they're doing, but they will just be doing basic strength training exercise, even barbell exercises. Like, everyone trains legs with me. You don't get an excuse to not do it, but just doing stuff like I'll do some squats, and I'll then, we'll even do some bench press sometimes and some bent over rows, and sometimes I'll tell people just, go onto all the machines on the gym and have a bit of fun, get a pump. It goes a long way, because it's just putting your body through its full range of motion with some resistance, with the idea of progressive overload. and you're not doing it too often, because the hand balance training, like, that takes a lot of your energy anyway. But this idea, like, you know, we could start talking about, like, oh, you need to do bicep curls because you're always working on elbow extension, and you have to do shoulder extension because we're always working shoulder flexion. These are good ideas to balance movement planes, but a general preparation of just working like vertical pulling, vertical pushing that aren't bodyweight training. I know it's a bit of heresy here. It goes a long way. You know, it does do something, and I'm convinced, like, you know, everyone gets a bodybuilding phase every now and then of just 6 to 8 weeks of working on, like, you know, slow exercises with time under tension in highest rep ranges, and it does wonders. Versus thinking like, oh yeah, if I do my external rotators every set, that will fix my problems. It's like, well, you know, train your human capacities, or I don't know, even your human capacity. I'm sure, train your basic stuff. Just do basics. That is the best you can do.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's it.
It does seem also like, I mean, a lot of very high performing athletes within various fields are doing stuff like squats, like bench press, like these kind of like various basic lifts. Definitely a good idea. I can't say I do too much of that. I do a lot of more calisthenics based stuff like handstand push-ups and so on. But
maybe it's time to do some bench press.
Yeah, maybe.
Put that on your program.
Possibly. Oh, I get so sore.
There's a hint.
Yeah, there's a hint. But I do remember, like, back in 2 years ago when I was probably at my most stellar shape ever. Then I was like, when I was living in Rotterdam, I did a bunch of other things. I used to just spend an hour in the gym doing various just quite easy things, but it felt great. I remember my shoulders were feeling really good from just like, hey, not doing just the exact same things over and over and over and over. So I definitely do think there's space for that within a handstand practice.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be your old practice, but a bit of it. Yeah. Other than that, I think we will wrap it up there. You've been great. We've been the Handstandcast. We need to start doing some hotlines. By the way, we now have a thing called Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to check that out, you can buy us a coffee. If you want to buy us something a bit more exuberant, you could buy a program off us on handstandfactory.com. Other than that, yeah. If you have any questions or if you have any answers, please send them to us at handstandfactory.com, either on the contact form or at handstandfactory on Instagram, and we'll put them in the rotation. Other than that, thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers.